information on future programs, and encourage you to help yourself to refreshments in the back of the room. Remind you to please turn off your cell phones or put them to silent. And the closest restrooms are located in the faculty dining room, which is over here to the left behind you. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is a grassroots organization working at the national, state, and local levels. The purpose of a study is to gain consensus, which directs state and national leaders in lobbying based on the needs of the local leagues. The scope of this study, as adopted by the League of Women Voters U.S., states the education study scope is broad and includes the following areas under the role of the federal government in public education: pre-K through grade 12, the history, funding, and equity issues, which are addressed under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and the Common Core Standards assessments, which are required for many federal grant programs, but are national, not federal. If you would like information about joining the League of Women Voters, we have information right over here. Steve Dana has some information for you, so please pick that up on your way out. Did everyone get a handout? If you don't have a handout, we can we'll pass those out to you. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Prue Dana, who's a League member, and she's going to explain the study and consensus process.
I'm going to repeat a couple of things that Tammy said, that the League of Women Voters is a tri-level organization, national, state, and local, and so if you join here or at any level, you're a part of the whole organization. And also that the League is a non-partisan group, which means that we do not support candidates, but the League speaks to issues which it has studied. And so that study process is very important at all of those levels. And so this is a national study tonight, and the League has determined that they would like to speak and be involved in these current education issues. And so in order to do that, we need to have the study process. So tonight, this is it. This is the beginning of educating ourselves. And then there will be a meeting September 13th, I believe, and in October. And those are two consensus meetings. And after study, leagues at all levels take consensus. And the best I can describe that is not a majority rule or unanimous rule, but it is a sense of what we all feel about an issue and can offer and say on an issue. So it's a sense of the group, and out of that group, a position is written that then is also passed at one of the national conventions, and then that becomes part of what we can get up and speak to. So tonight, that's what's happening, and you're all in on the study level here, and we would strongly encourage you to join us in September and October, for our consensus. If you join, you can help us come to consensus on those nights. So thank you, and thank you all for doing that.
Welcome again. I'm Kathleen Knight-Abowitz. I'm helping sponsor this event with the League. I'm the co-chair of the program for the local league. And I am delighted to introduce to you our panelists. To study a set of questions as complicated as those involving the federal role in public education, we needed to learn a lot of things. And so we gathered really smart people to help us learn a lot of things so that we can then deliberate on what we think about the federal role in public education. So we are really lucky to have here Kate Rubenaire, who is the chair of the Department of Educational Leadership at Miami University. Kate is a professor and a historian of education. a long career, 26 years in education. She is currently, as I said, the superintendent that has spent the past 8 years as the assistant superintendent in the school district. She attended Xavier University for master's and postmasters, has a degree from Miami in education, and is a former Talawanda student herself. So, yay! A homegrown superintendent. You don't see that every day of the week. We're lucky. And the fourth panelist, last but never least, is Mary Beth Bergeron, who is a school psychologist and intervention coordinator at Marshall Elementary. She is a clinical social worker, and she's a school psychologist by training. Her fancy title means that she works with kids who have behavior, health, or academic problems. So she works with teams of teachers to help kids who fit into those categories at Marshall Elementary. She has developed 2 501c3 nonprofit organizations, one a food pantry in Virginia, and the second the Oxford Literacy team in town. So she's done a variety of work at all levels with kids and families, so we're happy to welcome her here as well. The panelists will speak to us for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then we will open the floor for your comments, your questions, and your reactions. If you didn't get a handout that has the agenda on it, it's full of helpful information that our panelists will be referring to, so please don't hesitate to walk over that table and get one if you didn't get one. Thanks. Or raise your hand and Steve can pass you one over too.
Okay, so thanks Kathleen and all. I'm going to start giving a little historical context about federal involvement in education. As many of you know, American education is a local issue, and this was clarified by our nation's early founders. Education is not in the Constitution. It is a state and a local responsibility. And in this, the United States is very unusual amongst other nations. We are much more decentralized than other countries, which tend to have more centralized educational ministries with national curricula. So the American system is known for its local autonomy and reliance on local governance. And traditionally, American education has always been seen as a community responsibility, originally really community, and then reaching out to the states. So still, nonetheless, the federal government has always played a role in American education. And the legality of the federal involvement has been upheld by the court under the constitutional provision that Congress has the power to provide for the nation's general welfare and to ensure citizens of their due process of education under the 14th Amendment. So even though federal education is not in the Constitution, federal involvement in education began with the Founding Fathers. That's with the Northwest Ordinance of 1785 and 1787, which created the American legal boundaries of what is now the Midwest, and the provision for selling pieces of that land to individual settlers. The federal government divided up the land into townships. Many of the townships that we know from this region here divided into 13 land sections, and the government specified that the 16th section of each township would be allocated for public schooling. So essentially the federal government gave the land to the local community specifically for use of a school. And the designation of those school lands represented a belief shared by the new national government, by the Continental Congress, that good government relies on well-educated citizens. The argument was that you cannot have an active democracy without an educated citizenry to take part in that democracy. So federal involvement in education since that time has centered around 2 main motivations. One, national interest, and the Northwest Ordinance is an example of that national interest to promote democracy, enhance national productivity, strengthen national defense. And the second reason is equity, or to ensure equality of educational opportunity when local communities do not do so. So I'm going to give you some examples of federal involvement in education, first along the lines of national interest motivation, and secondly along the lines of equity motivation. Examples of federal involvement in education to further a national interest. The first significant one was in 1917, the Vocational Education Act, also known as the Smith-Hughes Act. This was the first federal funding of a specific education program, in this case vocational education, specifically education and teacher training in agriculture, trades, industry, and home economics. The federal government's motivation
significant one I'll talk briefly about is in 1958, the National Defense Education Act, NDEA. This was catalyzed by the Soviet Union's launching of the first satellite, Sputnik, the year before, and a motivation to improve American science education in K-12 and in college. And the act provided extensive federal funding not only for science education, but also for student guidance and career counseling and language instruction in foreign languages, and the development of educational media in the form of graduate fellowships, teacher education, and research development funds. So this bill crossed K-12 and higher education. And then in 2001, No Child Left Behind, a standards-based education reform originated at the federal government based on the belief that setting high standards and establishing measurable goals can improve individual outcomes in education and thereby improve education and the nation. So these are examples of federal government initiatives in education to promote the national interest. A second motivation was about equity. The federal government has also acted to ensure the equality of educational opportunity, or equity, playing a role in trying to even the playing field for public school children with funds and initiatives to provide equity. Some of these laws were developed as carrots, not as sticks. For example, if a state follows this certain policy, then it will receive federal funds, thereby avoiding the charge that these are federal mandates. Of course, this is sort of a debatable issue. The first example of this might surprise you. It did me. First example of equity-oriented federal involvement was 1946, the Free and Reduced Lunch Program. Signed into law by Harry Truman, it was a federally funded program to provide low-cost or free meals to children in need, and the funding came from the Department of Agriculture. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education was a Supreme Court decision, but it was followed by many federal laws that mandated that segregated schools were illegal. The court prohibited racially segregated schools, and the federal government developed policies of various strength that led to racially integrated schools. The motivation here was to protect constitutional rights in the 14th Amendment. 1965 Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This is part of President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, or Great Society bills, and it really has been the most far-reaching federal legislation affecting education ever passed by Congress. It explicitly forbid the creation of a national curriculum, an interesting point, even while providing significant federal funding to schools in the form of funding library and textbooks, supplementing educational services, educational research, and training. And also included in there were Title I federal aid to disadvantaged children to address the problems of poor urban and rural areas. And then two final federal education acts of interest to this group. One was 1975, Public Law 94-142, now codified as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. 1975, in order to receive federal funds, the states must develop and implement policies that assure a free, appropriate public education for all children with disabilities. And 1968, Bilingual Education Act, which provided school districts with federal funds to establish educational programs for students with limited English speaking ability. So these are all acts that were designed to impact equity, improve equity in the schools. I just want to conclude that with some just percentages of education that is federally funded. In 1930, 0% of education was federally funded. By 1950, 3% of education was federally funded. Those were the school lunch programs and some vocational education programs. In 1980, 9% support for children with disabilities, language education, etc. By 1990, it was down to 7%. And in the current year, it is about 11%. And this includes funding from the Department of Education and Health and Human Services and the No Child Left Behind Act. So that gives you a sense of the kind of, not the kind of dollars, but the kind of weight or emphasis that we have. We can say that in general, the average is about 9 to 10% of all school funding in one way or another comes from the federal government. Connie?
I decided not to mention the Reading First initiative in my 5 or 6 minutes, but you can ask me about that later. A logical first question about the Common Core standards is, of course, what For language arts, reading and analyzing literature is among the standards required of all students. Although initiating the development of the Common Core standards, it was the National Governors Association, along with the Council of Chief State School Officers, with development money from various commercial interests. An example of a 7th grade writing standard: gather relevant information from multiple print and digital sources, using search terms effectively. Assess the credibility and accuracy of each source, and quote or paraphrase the data in the opinions of others, while avoiding plagiarism and following a standard format of citation. I'll be working with my graduate students on that. Seriously. So the standards range from the minute to the mountainous, we might call these. I printed out the standards for English language arts and literacy across the curriculum, and there are 80 pages of very fine print for these students from kindergarten through grade 12. This is a national initiative of the states, as you can tell by the Council of Chief State School Officers, National Governors Association. Most states have signed on. About 45 out of 50 was the latest figure I was able to get. The standards are not federally mandated, or what Kate was saying, yes, or federally funded. But in order to apply for grants from the current federal education initiative, which is called Race to the Top, states have to agree to adopt the Common Core standards. Proponents say that raising the bar, that is, demanding more of students, will raise achievement. I think that's very close to the wording Arnie Duncan expressed quite recently. There's no evidence for this. In fact, the Brookings Institute study found just the opposite. Here's an interesting quote from an official Common Core Standards webpage. We need college and career readiness standards, which is intended to be, because even in high-performing states, students are graduating and passing all the required tests and still require remediation in their post-secondary work. With regard to standardized assessments, there are two consortia working to develop a whole array of possible assessments. One of the groups is called PARC, P-A-R-C-C, and then there's the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And among the variety of standardized assessments they're working on or considering will be, of course, some that are criterion reference. That is, they are designed to measure individual students' progress toward meeting the standards. But others, probably, I guess, could be the most common, because of the cost, will be standardized norm reference achievement tests. Basically, these aren't achievement tests at all. They're designed to rank order students from teachers, schools, the school systems, states, and even countries in international comparisons. The tests are designed so that a representative sample of students from across the country and different cultural groups and socioeconomic groups will give roughly a bell curve on the test scores. That is actually the test developers manipulate the questions until they get that kind of result. Therefore, as many students will score below average as score above average. And average has typically been designated as grade level. So half the population will be, by definition and design, below grade level. Critics said, as I mentioned before, there's no evidence that higher standards and more high-stakes testing will enhance learning. Assessment already takes way too much instruction time, and this will be much more so with the planned standardized assessments of the Common Core standards. also claimed inequality. Some of the, at least one of the consortia is talking about online assessments, and by the way, this is with the encouragement of Bill Gates to say that this is that would involve complex tasks on the computer, which is obviously going to require fairly complex computers, internet access, software. The schools can either accomplish this, there's obviously great inequality. The Common Core initiative, critics claim, is underfunded and will lead to gross inequalities across local school districts. And finally, a quote from Governor Perry of Texas. This seems to have been intended as a political attack on the current administration, which did fight back. But nevertheless, I think the statement is interesting. He wrote to the Federal Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, "I will not commit Texas taxpayers to unfunded federal obligations or to the adoption of unproven, cost-prohibitive national curriculum standards and tests." Race to the top would amount to as little as $75 per student in one-time funding. Yet the cost to Texas taxpayers to implement national standards and assessments could be, and this is just Texas, he was saying, up to an estimated $3 billion. Now, of course, I want to say, over how many years and where did you get your estimate? But nevertheless, I think his points are worthy of serious thought.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to push my chair in because I only have 5 minutes, and to talk about No Child Left Behind in 5 minutes, using the lens of a public educator, tell me if I'm talking too fast, and I certainly will respond to questions. But we've heard about the history of education. We've certainly heard about the development of core standards and where we're going with assessments. I'd like to talk to you just in regard to how do we deal with that on a day-to-day basis in a public institution. I will tell you that 26 years of education, I've always had to follow a curriculum deemed by the district aligned to the state. 26 years ago, it was called pupil performance objectives. Then we moved into outcomes, then we moved into standards, and now we're moving into core standards. So, we always need to understand what is it at a particular grade level or subject area does a learner need to understand? What is that target for the teacher instructionally to plan for, as well as the student understanding? No one can debate that. When George Bush came to Hamilton High School in 2001, I actually had a ticket to sit in the gymnasium, thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. My sister and I were administrators in Hamilton. We stood and clapped and just thought this was just wonderful, that for the first time, we actually had a national accountability system that would force us to really look at common assessments so that when our learners or students were moving from school to school within your district or from district to district or state to state, there was common expectations. So who would debate that? Also, he discussed accountability measures, which said we are responsible to provide student achievement. And if we don't do that, there's going to be rules and consequences around that. I would be the first person, no matter what I did, to say if I'm not doing my job, step aside. That's what we're hired to do. That was in 2001. Now, actually, as we implemented some of these things, I just would like to share some things with you. I certainly, and I see a lot of our employees, teachers, and instructional leaders who certainly work so hard on the alignment of curriculum. I'm here to say we should have aligned curriculum. We do need to be competitive within our school districts, within the county, within the state, within this nation, and outside this nation. When we look at data that compares the United States, you've read it for years in math, science, whatever it may be, it's somewhat embarrassing that we are not performing to some of even the smaller countries. So who would even want to debate that? We in Talawanda, because we're always looking at ways to fund what we need to do, we want to have an aligned curriculum. We want to be competitive, as you probably have seen with our data over years. We want to be able to offer our community members a quality education. So when we saw the Race to the Top initiatives, we worked with our union and said, hey, we don't really know, kind of like No Child Left 2014-15, all districts will be taking the state assessments, which in pre-8 will be online, as well as high school. The high school OGT is going to move into end of the course exams, which are going to, OGT's moving in, oh, how, thank you, Sally. I'm in a world, I am in a world of acronyms. Look up at that. Ohio graduation test. We are moving away from the Ohio graduation test in 2014-15 is what we hear. Again, depends on where all this is going. They're moving into end of the course exams, which the Ohio graduation test is more of a grade 8-10 test. The state will say it's more of a grade 8-9 test. The end of course will be more of a 10-12 around curriculum. Again, depending on where your curriculum is, you have to understand it and be able to teach it to the child. The accountability has forced us to really look at pacing, really look at a balanced assessment system. This isn't just about a 1 week or 1 day assessment. This is really understanding where each student's ability level is and putting the curriculum right where they can hit it. Will that be below grade level, for the average, on grade level, or above? Now again, as we're working towards this model and expectation, as we talked about funding, it's unfunded. Many of our mandates are unfunded. Now competitive districts are going to align with expectations, but it's caused us to look at our budget. We're not just going to keep adding to a budget without taking things away. We don't have that luxury. So it forces us to look at what are our priorities and where are we putting our money. In Talawanda, we've really had to we've shaved over $2 million off our budget just over the last several years. That's a whole nother conversation around budget. So I'm kind of going all over the place, but core assessments, core standards, may it be a pupil performance objective, an outcome, a standard, or a core standard, we have to know what the targets are across the state and in our districts. We have to have a balanced assessment system, which isn't just a 1-day assessment. It's looking at what does the child or learner know prior to instruction all the way through the end of that instruction and really teaching to that level. It's also not just a summative test at the end of units, it's that formative piece that I just talked about. The accountability part is the part that, as a public institution, I struggle with. With this accountability measure, not to get too comprehensive, because again, that's going to take more than a couple minutes, we have to look at indicators, which are the assessments that the state basically says you have to get on what grade levels, what subject areas. We have to look at our performance index, growth over time. We have to look at adequate yearly progress, and we also have to look at value added. Is every student making at least 1 year growth in 1 year amount of time? No one's going to argue that those things aren't important. Also with accountability, we need to look at, are our students of poverty performing at the same rate as those of not? Are students with an IEP, individual educational plan, a student that qualifies for a special service, are they performing at the same rate? Are students of color performing at the same rate? Are our English language learners performing at the same rate? So we have to certainly know every individual student. That's accountability piece. Now, no one's going to argue with that. Where I have a problem is that they put certain rules on. For instance, I don't know if you recall, several years ago, Mary Beth was bringing this to my attention. My mouth is going dry, I apologize. She was bringing this to my attention. Oh, thank you. I have had all my shots. At Kramer, high performance school, they're excellent. We were in school improvement at Kramer because Kramer has more students in each of those bands that I just talked about. May it be students of color, may it be students of various languages, may it be students on IEPs, individual educational plans. So they were held at a higher level than some of our schools that didn't have the number required for those rules. And I never will forget, because they were in what they called school improvement, we didn't hit a certain target that they said we had to hit. I had to put out letters to all of our families at Kramer that says you have a right to school choice. You have the right to go to Marshall, and I don't believe we had Bogan open at the time. And we have to fund the transportation to get your child there. Now, in my heart of all hearts, are they getting a better education at one building than the other? We hire the best Another rule around accountability is this. Although the average across the state, students on an IEP, an individual educational plan that qualifies for a special service is around 10%. Talawanda is right at that average. Yet we can only put 1% of those 10%, are you with me, on what we call a different assessment, an alternative assessment. Now, I know. And if you go over that 1%, those scores do not count towards your report card. So it's little measures like that where I wonder, where are these people that are making rules at the federal level, where are these rules coming from? If we truly believe that the standards are important and assessments are important, I wish they would give us more local control to not cap a percentage on who and what kind of test they can take. Because if we truly are teaching, as I said earlier, in a form where we're assessing kids to understand where they are before we even start a unit, so we're pitching that curriculum maybe below, at, or above, we should be able to give assessments the same way. So I'm way off script, but that's where my passion comes from around accountability. It's not the standards, it's not the assessments, it's accountability measures that make no sense as to percentiles and what happens if you don't reach certain outcomes in what they call small designated time. I'm here to say all of our buildings at Talawanda are rated excellent. I'm so glad our constituents didn't move the year we had to put out that school choice report card. They're getting a good quality education. Sometimes it's just really understanding what the state expectation is, aligning your resources in a district to get there, maybe that's your curriculum and materials, and having professional development around that. With all that said, again, we wanted to be raised to the top because that gave Talawanda $211,000, which may not be a whole lot to some school districts as they got millions. It certainly helps our budget. We weren't going to do these things anyway. So federally, the feds have designated $3.4 billion to race to the top. And again, I think it's their way to make sure that states are being competitive and doing what they want. Ohio's received $400 million. Talawanda received $211 out of Ohio for something we were going to do anyway. We're in year 2 of this grant, and the only thing is we have to implement the expectation in a fast track. Which we would be doing with curriculum and assessments anyway. There is a piece around evaluations that's going to be kind of complicated on this fast track, but we're going to work through it. So on that note, I would just like to say that as we look at the accountability measures and how this impacts funding, I think we need to remain competitive. We also need to, as a school district, a public school district, really prioritize. It's causing us to cut things from our budget that we would consider maybe not aligned to state or federal expectation, because we do want to remain competitive. Our national budget's going to be reduced 10 to 20%, which is going to impact schools, which is going to impact local funding over the next several years. This puts a burden on local taxpayers. We also know from this economy that people are not able to pay for their property taxes right now, or their income taxes in all cases. So again,
and stays in the top 10. So there are some states that come in and out. But what I tried to do was rank the top five by per pupil expenditure, and then the bottom five. And you can see how the rankings fell for fourth grade reading scores in 2009. How they ranked out of the 52, we included some of the possessions, the United States possessions in there. And then the graduation rates, the freshman graduation rates within 4 years. So, for example, District of Columbia is 2+ times Utah in the per pupil expenditure, but ranked 50th in this count. Idaho, which was about less than half of Vermont, ranked 14th in the graduation rates of the freshmen in 4 years that year. So I think the themes here, and you're welcome to check the sources for more of a treasure trove of information, but one of the themes here is that a simplified response of more money alone doesn't generate equitable outcomes, nor does equitable per pupil expenditure predict equitable outcomes. It's much more complicated than that. And I'm a school employee. I want more money so that we can have more manpower to do the meaningful work that we do. But I think if our objective here tonight is to provide the League of Women's Voters and citizens here with information for informed consensus on these very difficult issues, one of the things that I think we have to be cautious about is an oversimplified approach. National tests, national curriculum. It sounds good, and truly there is merit, as we heard from Connie and Kate and Kelly, on there is merit in accountability, and there's merit in measurement, and there's so much merit in a lot of the mandates, but truly we have to just be careful and oversimplified remedies. So that's just something to look at. I think the key questions at this time are, what actions of the federal government contribute to equity? And equity, let's call it equity access. Full access by all children and adolescents to meaningful instruction. So what are the actions of the government that contribute to that? And I'm not going to repeat what's been said in the landmark legislation, the court cases, the implementation of meaningful mandates for accountability, teacher accountability. Years ago, and not that many years ago, but let's say around 10 years ago, you could walk into a first-grade classroom in most districts and see one thing going on in one class and another thing going on in another on a given day. And so the accountability piece, for example, has real merit for all children in that we're not teacher-specific or teacher-centered in the quality of instruction. We're a program centered, and that's been a meaningful outcome. So there are a lot of actions on the federal government's part that have been highly, strong contributors to equity and access in education. What I think I'd like to just mention that are at least 4 things that I think are very worrisome when we talk about what about federal government action impedes and interferes with equity. The underfunding. IDEA dates back to 1975 when high school class of 75. That law has never met the goal of 40% federal funding. Never. It reached a high of 17, has hovered around 14%. So if you are a small school district and moving into your school district is a family of children with children with multiple and severe disabilities, for whom the individual education program includes OT, PT, speech, nursing, specialized instruction, equipment, we're going to deliver. We must deliver. One, because it's the right thing to do. 2, because in our district we roll up our sleeves, we pitch in, we make it happen. We collaborate with other school districts. But it is a terrifically challenging situation for many small districts when you have low incidence disability populations move into join your school district, and we welcome them. They contribute greatly, children with very profiles like this. But the challenge punitive model that has been cited. The notion that should you not meet these standards on your school report card or district report card, then there are consequences for you. And I was a part of that Kramer faculty. The summer those letters came out, and we were very hurt by the fact that our parents were invited to consider another school in Kramer district. So there is this notion, if you're a behaviorist as I am, you know that punitive measures have short-term outcomes that you might want to see. You know, you can take that youngin' and you can pull that TV plug out of the wall and say, get to bed. And you can, you can secure some short-term goal there, but in the long-term, punitive measures have adverse effects. And so that's just an example. I think that concerns about merit pay and about teaching and administrative careers on the line, given the single day, single performance, and single test students in your district. And these are pieces that we just have to be very careful and guard against simple or oversimplified cures or remedies. The competitive model is the third thing I'm a little concerned about. As a citizen and an educator, Texas opted out. They opted out of Race to the Top. So that child in some West Texas small town, his opportunity perhaps to access some enhanced programming available maybe through Race to the Top is lost at the discretion of the governors or the leadership in the state because they opted out. So there are some very interesting things happening in this model to compel states and localities to be successful in delivering meaningful instruction. I think the fourth thing I'd like to mention as a worrisome component of this model, of the machinery that's working right now, has to do with charter schools. I just put a little fact in there. Number of charter schools in 1991, and this is the bottom of the handout. 2004 we had 3,000. And there was a neat article in there. Federal Florida charters are less diverse than other public schools. Well, of course they are. You know, there are. You're seeing a pattern in the school of choice. Charters, you can see a pattern of a more homogeneous population there. So that this whole long, wonderful history of access, equity, is undermined by some activities that are designed to promote quality instruction. So it's kind of ironic. I have time for one story, perhaps? Okay, short story. So what do we do about it? I would like to tell you that I think there are some winners in this process, and they're the folks who construct the tests and publish the tests. And if you've heard NPR Sunday morning, did you hear about the cheating scandals? And there are now forensic test specialists. There's an industry. They test erasure patterns. And there's a forensic test specialist. So there are some winners here, but I think the losers in this are some of the individuals who are not protected under the law. So we have, unfunded surely, but we have mandates to serve exceptional children, gifted individuals with disabilities, English language learners. We have a lot of protections, some might say more than others, of course, depending on the funding, on individuals with disabilities. The individuals I'm concerned about are those at risk because of poverty, family trauma, our 2-week summer program. At the end of that summer program, we took benchmarking, which we sampled his reading skills again, 62 words a minute. And we opened up his head and we poured stuff in, let me tell you. But as he enters the 4th grade, benchmark is 90 in the fall, and so still well below the benchmark. Now, if we had adhered to strict criteria on, well, sorry, special educator, you got your population, sorry, gifted teacher, sorry, we would have done what was expected of us. We've been in a 3rd grade class getting exposure to wonderful instruction, but holy cow, like this, gotta keep pace, and stressed out. So, what I'm saying is we're getting it done, and you can have stories about this across the country and across Butler County. We're getting it done, but under the current machine, if you will, this is an individual who's actually excluded, and who is at risk for being losing access to meaningful instruction if we hold hard and fast. So we are very fortunate in Talawanda to have flexibility, to have an attitude towards all building resources are building resources. That is just in sum my concern about who's potentially a loser under the current model. Thank you.
I wanted to say a couple of things, if you don't mind. Kelly said something about the international comparisons, and what most people don't have access to in terms of information on that is if you factor out poverty, we do quite well. I know some of you at least must have been able to pick up a copy of this Race to the Top Questions and Answers by my friend Steve Crasher. He's a consummate researcher. And he points out, I think I'll even just read a sentence or two. Students from well-funded schools who come from high-income families outscore all, or nearly all, of the countries on international tests. We have a poverty rate of over 20%. Finland, for example, who always scores very high and sometimes higher than we do, has a poverty rate of 4%. We assess all our students. The poverty stricken, as well as the moderately affluent and really affluent. So when you compare apples with apples, we do quite well. And then the other thing, no, I didn't.
So that went there too.
Right. So, it's really important.
All
when
countries
people-
don't follow the same assessment rule, is what we're discussing.
Right, yeah. So when people toss that information out, we do so badly in international comparisons, none. Well, I'd like to make one other point. I'd like to see Kelly.
I'm grounded after class.
I would like to see Kelly and the people at Talawanda clone, because this has not been, their attitude towards working with children who need extra help has not been my experience when I've been elsewhere in the country. The place where I've lived most of my professional life. They have a language arts person who would tell the teachers, don't worry about these kids, we'll never raise them to do well. Just worry about the ones who might have some hope of really good test scores. So I want to clone you guys and send you everywhere.
Thanks for your patience. Please feel free to ask our panelists questions or make comments about what you've heard and share your perspectives. Anybody want to start?
Do I understand that No Child Left Behind is no longer in, and Race to the Top is the new?
That's correct.
We still have No Child Left Behind. It's being reauthorized. Correct me if I'm wrong, my instructional leaders back there. It's being reauthorized with accountability measures, but the standards
something we don't know what it's going to.
They get state and local funding.
If you send your child to a charter school, that child takes with them
The funding.
the local and federal tax money.
But it's
And
our
it's-
taxpayers' money.
Right, and it's
being
pulled out of
used.
the public
Yeah.
school system.
Well, it's just our money, and we don't have any assessment of whether it's being used wisely or not.
And it's been constitutionally, at least at the state level, approved that that money can go to religious schools. And in Indiana, the large majority of the charter schools to which students pay public money are religious schools, because that's so far been approved by the courts.
Yes.
Going back to charter schools, there was a House bill in